Yeah, get your data together. That's an asset. So get your data together, aggregate as much data as you can that's relevant to your business. It's going to be a superpower that's going to help you serve your clients better in the future and innovate better and all that. So get your data together.
Hi, I'm Ed Marsh, host of the Industrial Growth Institute podcast, where we get to chat with folks with unique and I think really creative insights into growing industrial business. As you'll hear with our guests today, they don't all necessarily come from an industrial place professionally, but their insights can really bring a fresh perspective to traditional business. So today I'm joined by Peter Caputa. I've known Pete since I'd say I couldn't find it exactly, maybe 2012, 2013, when he was growing the partner program at HubSpot. So for more than a decade, I've been able to follow him, and I always learn something when I read his stuff or chat with him. Peter is the CEO of Databox. That's an online software firm that helps businesses improve their performance by helping companies extract meaningful data insights from the data that exists across the many platforms that we all now use. Their primary clients are marketing agencies who use the tools to help their clients visualize their business. But I think there's more opportunity with it, as we'll talk about today. So we're going to hear a lot about Peter's career, about some of his interesting background, how that contributes to his insights, and most importantly, some of his observations and predictions about how we're going to be growing businesses as we go forward. So welcome, Peter, and thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Ed. I love your podcast voice. It's soothing.
Well, I hope it doesn't put
Slightly
anybody to
different than
sleep.
your
Soothing
regular
is one thing. Business is stressful, but I hope it doesn't make you tired. so, so let's start by getting to know you. I mean, tell me,
All
who's
right.
Peter?
Who's Peter? Well, I don't know where to start with that, but I think you know this. I do have an engineering degree, and I did spend 7 years in a manufacturing company where I was a product development engineer, a sales engineer for a little while, and then I worked in R&D, developing processes for our customers. So.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I have a little bit of knowledge of manufacturing. It might be dated now because that was 20 years ago now.
It's
But
not a lot different than 20 years ago, at least when we talk about marketing and
that's
sales and
that's
manufacturing.
kind of what I noticed is that because there wasn't much change in there in my 7 years. They were
Right.
still printing a brochure and visiting customers, and I'm sure a lot of that stuff it still happens now and it is important. But in fact, the project that I did before I left there was helping them launch an e-commerce catalog to sell their products online.
Oh, cool. I didn't realize
But
that. I
then,
hadn't heard that story before.
yeah, but then we shut it down. We spent like this was the late '90s, early 2000, and we spent it was two full-time people like employed, so probably about 150 grand total, maybe 200 grand there, and then we hired contractors for a quarter million. So we spent close to $500,000 worth of money on launching this thing, and then we shut it down several years later after it generated a total of $16,000 worth of revenue.
Oh my goodness.
So
Where did that fail? Were you able to
this
kind
was a
of
billion dollar company, so it was a blip for them. But the product was sold through manufacturer or through distributors in a field sales environment with a where and the product was used to manufacture other products. So it was a complex product that generally required um, sometimes custom specking, but pretty much always custom selection of
okay.
the product, and generally had to be tested in the manufacturing environment before it would be implemented. And so ordering it off the catalog was a challenge, right? There
Do you
was
think
multiple people involved in the sale, both the salesperson, oftentimes a distributor, and then the sales engineer often as
would it be
well.
different now? Are attitudes changed to the point where you think people would be comfortable with it, or are there just impediments to some
Um,
products in e-commerce?
I actually have friends still there. I'm pretty sure that the majority of the product still goes through distribution. It's mission critical stuff, so
Right.
there needs to be an inventory somewhere. And I think the way that industry works, at least, is that The distributors, part of the value they add is just having inventory,
Got it.
and not forcing the buyer to incur that cost before they need it. So
Well, I know there's kind of an echo there of some things we're going to talk about later
yeah,
because I know you're a huge
I
fan
bet.
of channel. You think there's a lot of
Right.
opportunity with channels, so we're definitely going to come back to that. But after seven
Yeah.
years wearing your industrial engineer hat, doing R&D and
Yeah.
sales, then your own startup, I think, for 6 years, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. It was a little bit of overlap because it was like a nights and weekends. I was young in my early 20s and or mid 20s, I guess. And so yeah, a bunch of friends of mine decided to plan some trips, some events for fun, and then I realized there was no online software at the time for putting up like a website to promote an event and manage registration and promotion and stuff. So it's kind of like a little bit of a social network that I built where I had multiple people promoting events, and I did that for a while. I really knew nothing else about running a business, and so we struggled to really make that profitable, although we had plenty of customers. And then yeah, then I learned. I went and I learned. I realized I didn't know how to sell very well, even though I was a sales engineer before. So I ended up hiring a sales coach who Rick Roberge and Dave Curlin. Ended up going through like a year long program with them to learn how to sell. And then Rick ended up introducing me to his son who was working on his own startup at the time and consulting for another startup, which we both know at the time called HubSpot. And Mark ended up becoming the VP of sales there. And once he started building the sales team out, called me and said, "Hey, do you want to join the company?" Initially, I said no, but ended up joining a month or two later. And we shut our business down after that.
And I think
So,
there's a really interesting thread there. I'm actually scheduled to talk to Carol Mahoney about a specific
great.
kind of salesperson who's willing to go out on their own and hire a sales coach. Not the company doing it for them, but them doing it
Yeah.
personally. And I think that's such a cool and unique mindset. And
Yeah.
so I'm not surprised to hear that that's exactly what you did. And then nine
Yeah, yeah,
years
it
of
was it
HubSpot.
was a lot of money. I think I had booked. I closed about maybe $35,000 worth of revenue, like the year before I hired him, and then he charged me. I want to say it was like 10 grand.
Hmm.
So that was a big investment for me. It was my business, so of course I had a ownership mentality
Right.
around making investments. But that was the other than my actual college. That was which wasn't really a conscious decision when you're at 17 years old.
Right.
That was the biggest investment I had made in myself in a long time, so or ever.
So then 9 years of HubSpot, and we'll talk about building the
Yeah,
channel program, and then Databox, I think for 7 years, right?
7. Yeah, 9 at HubSpot and then 7 at Databox. Yep. Yeah.
So 7, 6, 9, and 7, those are longer tenures than I'd say we typically see these days. Any thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
Yeah. I have an opinion on that for sure. You might know it, but I feel like most people jump around from job to job too much. And when I look back at my career, maybe I stayed at my earlier things too long. Maybe I kept my startup on, running for too long. But I think when I like spending 9 years at HubSpot was obviously transformative for me as I went from being a individual contributor to running a large sales team, which accounted for 40% of revenue. So that was a financially, life changing thing for me, and career trajectory changing thing for me. And then same here at Databox. I'm running the company. It was when I joined. I joined as CEO. But when I look back, like I feel like every few years there's really some major lessons that I learned, and if I had quit earlier, those lessons would not be there, and they build upon each other. Like I think the knowledge that you gain inside of a specific company makes decisions easier, um, makes it easier to identify ways to have to drive growth and have an impact. So
But
I'm a
as
big
as
believer in
and
sticking
as I've
around.
watched you, you've actually across that career trajectory since I met you when you were early on at HubSpot, I have watched you still talking, obviously tweaking and evolving some of your basic ideas, but still talking about and implementing or executing or refining many of the same things you talked early on. So
Yeah.
definitely you've got a perseverance and a grit and a determination and a focus, and you kind of, I think you take that engineering mindset, you identify the problem, and then you work to solve it rather than just look for an easy button.
No one's actually ever pointed that out, and it's a very astute thing. But you're right. I think I have perspectives that I formed about business and how to build businesses 20 years ago that I still feel I have to prove in a way.
Right.
Even despite having successes along the way with it, I think I look at it as like a constant tweak to running experiments to get to the point where I have a business that is growing fast and very profitably. If that feels like the challenge of business, right? Like in most businesses, you either grow slow and profitably, or you grow fast and burn cash. And
Right.
software businesses, especially when you raise money, you're expected to burn all that capital in order to grow really fast.
Right.
There's very little capital investments, like many of your clients, of course. Um, and so in some businesses, you need that money to grow. But I look at businesses like, how can I grow as fast as possible, and how can I be as profitable as possible? And I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive. I think there's a way to build a business that where you achieve both, and that's like my holy grail of what I'm trying to achieve.
And a really interesting blend, I would say, between audacity, like when you commented on Seth's blog post. I mean, maybe you can tell us that story quickly, and then kind of this conservative, very incremental engineering approach as well. But when you run
Yeah,
tests, what I've observed, a lot of people say they're running tests because what that does is it gives them air cover to say, oh, well, we tested it, and now we need to do another
yeah,
test and another test. But you do the test to see if it's going to work, and if it does, then you implement it.
yeah, yeah. A guy named James Robert Lay shared this quote with me the other day. I hadn't heard of it. I'm sure other people have, but it's like, make it up, make it real, and make it scale. And so that's, without me ever hearing the quote, that is the way I operate. It's figure out like, what is it that we want, what process do we want to follow, what's the output of that process, how do we build that, how do I literally have conversations with people or go build something and get validation from people. And then at that point, it's like, okay, I made it up. And
Right.
now it's like, how do I make it real, or make it repeat? Right. And so like, I got to go now and see, all right, I know one person wants that. I know one customer wants that, or one partner will do that. Can I go and get 10 or 20 to do that?
Right.
And then because usually to get the 20th person or the 10th person to do it, really have to tweak it a lot. And through iterations with 20 or 30 times, I usually can figure out, okay, this is the thing that will work for 50% of the people we bring it to.
Right.
And at that point, it's time to think, all right, how do I do this really efficiently? So one project, for example, we just rolled out is a training course for a specific partnership process that we built. And uh, it's like it's about as long as a business book. It's like 30,000 words. And we recorded all the material, and like, there's people we've been working with for 12 months that have watched just the first few chapters, which I consider basic, and they're like, oh, I learned 5 things from that I didn't know before. And
Wow.
so now I don't have to get on a call with them and walk them through that anymore. My team
Right.
doesn't have to get on a call. I can just say, hey, go take this course. You should come out of that understanding everything. So
Right.
I think there's ways to scale things, even complex things, and that's I guess when I'm building something, I'm trying to get to that point.
Yeah, so I hear that the echoes of your engineering background, and I think
Yeah.
we're going to encounter that as we go through this conversation. But do you want to tell us the story about when you took Seth to task?
Are you talking about Seth Godin?
Yeah, when he had brief blog posts or something, and you commented on how they weren't substantive enough to have any value, didn't you?
Similar. Um, so for those who don't know Seth Godin, he's like a well-known marketing book author from the late '90s, early 2000s. Is kind of when he got big. So he was one of the first like digital. authors of digital marketing books, and so he was a god to most of us. And he was writing these things, and he launched some kind of an internship program, and I just was offended that he was having people work for him for free. Uh, and so I wrote something out about, hey, you've never actually built a business. Like all you've done is told us how to do it. And so it was a blog post on my own blog at the time. This is
Got
early
it.
2000s. And um, and like just go build a business again. Like it's not easy. It's not as easy as it was in 1995. So and I don't even know what he did himself. Really, it was a relatively modest result
Right.
as an entrepreneur. And so he responded and would kind of tried to explain himself and like that. So I don't know. I guess you know me. I'm not afraid to speak truth to power.
Yeah, you've got an
Roughly.
irreverence that I think has has driven you through your careers. It's sometimes when I've been the subject of it, it hasn't been comfortable, but it's entertaining when you watch it from the outside too.
Yeah, I love you.
So what employee number were you at HubSpot?
15th, the 15th employee.
15th, and
Yeah.
then you were on Wall Street helping ring the bell for the IPO, right?
Yeah, I didn't get to go up on the balcony, but I was there. There were like maybe 50 of us there, and like 15 people got to go and like actually ring the bell. But
What a
yeah, I got to
rush.
be on the floor, watched everything that was going on around it, watched it on a ticker as it went live and the stock price went up. And it was pretty cool. Yeah,
That's neat.
absolutely. Quite an
But
experience.
you're not just an engineer and a tech guy. You're a farmer. You're a soccer player. You're a beer drinker. Tell me about some of those other aspects of you.
Yeah. Wow, this is like getting personal. So I wouldn't call myself a farmer. I like to garden. I have ambitions of owning a farm someday, but I'm not very good at doing more than one thing at a time. So, because I'm somewhat obsessive over what I'm working on usually. So I have a acre and a half here, and I've probably planted a few thousand plants, mostly shrubs and perennials and stuff like that. So there's always flowers. I can pick a bouquet of flower pretty much every week for my wife, and so I love that. I've been playing soccer since I was little, since like first or second grade. It was actually my aunt drove me to tryouts or to team assignments, and um, I was kicking and screaming, but I still play soccer to this day. I was fortunate to play in college for a little bit when I wasn't injured, and yeah, no, I love the game. It's a good mental distraction for me. It's the only time I think in my life where my brain isn't thinking about some business problem or something else, and I can just 100% focusing on the present. So I love that.
any
And yeah,
any
I enjoy craft beer for sure.
and we'll have to find out your favorite flavor here in a minute. But any thoughts
Yeah.
on NCAA athletes and any particular what's the right way to say it? I've seen among NCAA athletes who go into sales, I think a higher level of commitment to excellence and a willingness to
Mhm.
learn, be coached, hold themselves accountable. Do Have you seen that? Do you sense that, or is that something
I
that I'm
so I don't know. I don't have enough sample size. I love gathering data, but I'm also hesitant to make conclusions off of my own
right?
uh, incomplete sample. But uh, I think yeah, if you're gonna be, I don't even think it needs to be NCAA. Like my son's 16, and I can see the drive that he has for the game and how it helps him think critically about his own performance, and think about how he can get the most out of his teammates or work best with his teammates. And so I think there's so many lessons in team sports that are applicable to business, um, as far as uh, you know whether you got to be NCAA, I don't know. I
Fair. Okay.
personally actually was not very coachable as an athlete. It was part of my issue.
Right.
In fact, I didn't know it at the time; I was just unaware. But my high school coach apparently talked to my college coach and told him that. And then my college coach had that impression of me for most years, and I kind of proved him right. He wasn't the best to give him feedback either, but I never really solicited it.
And then
So
once you went into sales, do you think any of your sales managers had a similar impression?
oh yeah. I was so as a sales engineer, I reported to another engineer, and yeah, no, she didn't quite know how to influence me very well. I did
Got
my
it.
own thing, and then I ran my own business as a salesperson, so I didn't really have a manager.
Right.
And then I mostly worked for Mark Roberge at HubSpot, and he knew that I was not manageable. But he had his ways of asking me questions and get me to think and get to my own conclusions. And that was enough, obviously, for
Well, and
both of
I
us for
think
a while.
part of Rick Roberge's value proposition is he can use a two by four, upside the head to help manage you as well. So that may
Yeah,
have
well,
been
so I hired Rick. So like I asked for the beating, right? Like I asked him to tell me what the hell did I do wrong. I knew enough to know that I didn't. But once I knew enough, I'm like, I don't need any more help. And I did very well at HubSpot. I think I might have missed my quota once, by one deal or something. So
wow.
I didn't really need coaching. I ended up coaching many of the salespeople there, to be top performers. So
So let's
um,
talk about
I'm
that. You
not saying
started
I
at
can
HubSpot,
sell anything, but I feel like I have that skill to
right?
the point where
Sure.
I need it, the level that I need it.
So you started selling as a sales
Hmm.
rep at HubSpot, and then I think a couple years into that, then basically you had the idea, or you took responsibility, or you were handed this project to create a channel. How did that all
That's
happen?
right. Yeah. So in my startup, we were doing event marketing, which got us into email marketing, which got us into building websites.
Okay.
And because we weren't making any money, I would kind of do all kinds of things. Like I'd do email marketing, build websites for people, etc. So going into HubSpot, I knew a decent amount about website development and design and internet marketing, SEO, email, etc. So I when I was in the funnel, I would talk to marketing agencies and I'd be able to relate to them a little better than the typical HubSpot sales rep at the time, because I not only knew the work that they were doing, but I also knew the struggles of running that business, which
Hmm.
at the time was cash flow. Because
Right.
most companies that were investing in internet marketing were like building a website and then maybe getting help to launch an email newsletter and then maybe do SEO for 6 months to update the website. So these were all project based
Right.
jobs. And so that what I realized with HubSpot is that you could take those services and make them recurring or retainer jobs, as you know, because you followed the model. And that allowed me to go and start talking to agencies. Now, when I discovered that, I took it to the management team, including the CEO Brian Halligan, and they're like, "No, we're selling against that. Like we're selling that it's easy. You don't need to hire somebody. They're just those people are taking money and they're not doing any work." Like we literally had a very strong perspective in the beginning that we were competition for agencies. And so he said, "No, we're not doing that." So I'm like, "All right, fine." But I kept talking to agencies. Then I started getting referrals, and I'm like, "All right." So I went and pitched it again, and it's like, no, I can see what you're doing. They kind of like agree that maybe we don't have to be so hardcore about our messaging against agencies. And they kind of said, but no, we're not launching a program. It's like a pain in the ass. We have to like answer to them. We're going to send them commission. Like we'll get in conflict with leads. Like there's so many things that you have to think about that we just don't want to deal with right now, because at the time, and I didn't know that, we were raising our Series B. And so they just didn't want any distractions. So I'm like, all right,
Right.
fine. So I kept working with agencies and all that, to the point where I was crushing my sales quota. And because I could get those referrals and work with the agencies, they weren't stopping me from doing it. There
Hmm.
just was no lead registration. There was no commission. So I was doing it based on the value that we could bring to the agency and their clients. And at that point, they said, well, why don't you come back one more time and pitch it? And after this like 2 hour long meeting, and I was literally about to leave the room pissed off because I felt like they just asked me to waste 2 hours of my time. They're like, fine, you can start the program. And then he gave me two other orders. Like you're reporting to Mike Volpe, who was in charge of marketing at the time. And I forget what the other one was. But basically, I got to start the program, and they let me have an intern. And then, from there, with the intern's help and a little bit of marketing, I was able to start consistently achieving the 2x my quota,
And now,
2x
15
the
years
quota.
later, I think HubSpot's gone to a 100% partner attached model and a huge emphasis on ecosystem, right?
Are they? So I don't know. I know I just today was ecosystem day and I I didn't go at HubSpot. We're an integration partner, so I don't always stay on top of the solution partner stuff like you might. I know that they eliminated the um, channel sales role. And
Right.
so now if a partner wants to close a deal, they work with the direct rep. I don't know if they've gone so far as to say that every direct deal has to have a partner attached. I don't think they have. I can't imagine they would.
That was my
But
impression, but I don't follow it in great detail either.
okay. Yeah,
So,
I just don't know.
point
I
is, I
wouldn't
mean,
be.
it's become a huge portion of their business and of their mindset and of
Oh
their
yeah, yeah, yeah.
philosophy, and it
Yeah,
goes
yeah,
back to
it's
your
massive.
experiment and your persistence and your grit. That's neat.
Yes.
Um,
Sure.
Now, along that way, you obviously had direct sales, you had inbound
Mhm.
marketing, there was kind of inbound lead generation sales, obviously channel sales. So, a lot of different revenue growth models. And now, kind of channel is evolving into this nearbound movement. And I know
Mhm.
that Jared Fuller called you out recently for the contributions that you made to his thinking and understanding that led to the recent book that he published and some of that. So,
Yeah.
give us a couple thoughts on that evolution that you've seen from traditional direct sales to inbound marketing attraction to nearbound surrounding people.
Yeah. So this goes back to my thesis around building a really profitable business quickly and growing it quickly. um, I think if an organization embraces partnerships, not just from a resale perspective, reselling the product, but from a marketing perspective, from a servicing the customer client perspective, you can really build a fast growth, high margin business. And that's what the way I see Nearbound. I think Jared, if you go to the nearbound.com, you can see there's a book there, and there's he used my quote. I think it's like if you want to grow business fast and profitably, here's your playbook. And I think he's
Right.
really written a playbook for how to collaborate with partners across the entire life cycle of the journey. So collaborate with your partners on marketing, collaborate with them on the sales, and collaborate with them on servicing the client. And if you think about how to do that digitally, it can become really scalable, really efficient. And so I think at HubSpot, we literally called it the value added reseller program. I hated the term, but that's what they told me to call it. And
What
and
was
it
your vote?
was,
What would you have called it?
I was turning marketing agencies into resellers of our product,
Hmm.
and they were adding value for sure. So it was an accurate descriptor of what they were doing. It's just that, like, I would get on a call with a marketing agency owner and say, "Do you want to be a reseller?" And they're like, "No, I don't want to resell your product." So
Got it.
just it was a bad way to introduce it to them, because what we taught them is how to sell services using the product,
Right.
higher margin services using the product. So that was a better way to position it as a partner program. They later renamed it the Solutions Partner Program because they expanded well beyond marketing agencies. In fact, we recently ran a survey of about 100 HubSpot partners, and the most popular top service offering is actually CRM integration, which so they're well beyond just having marketing agencies as partners. So I think it's changed quite a bit, and they are leveraging partners much more on the services side. So instead of having new HubSpot customers go through onboarding or account management and with the HubSpot employees, they are outsourcing or directing those customers to partners. So I think they've really embraced the nearbound movement. They've also partnered with the company behind the nearbound movement, Reveal,
Hmm.
where Jared is the chief revenue officer, and they're enabling their ecosystem to co-sell as well. It's for companies like mine, other software companies like mine. So the HubSpot's really on the vanguard here of partnerships for sure.
Got it. Um, Now, hearkening back to when you were willing to poke the bear and challenge Seth Godin, every once in a while you have LinkedIn posts that kind of do the same thing. You had one the other day where you basically predicted that the heyday of the inbound sales development rep is coming to an end, and
Yeah.
that elicited some enthusiastic feedback from marketers who think that sales isn't adding much value, and it elicited some fairly strong negative feedback from people in the sales world. But
Yeah.
I want to talk about it really from the angle of industrial companies that haven't
Sure. Yeah, I was
gotten
going
to
to
that
ask you.
point yet of adopting SDRs. They
Okay.
may not even really do inbound very well yet. They may
Yeah.
not have much content. So
Yeah.
kind of explain the model quickly and why you think it's broken. And I think an analog may be, in a lot of developing world countries, they go directly from having no phone line to mobile. And so I think the
Yeah.
industrial companies have the opportunity to learn from the lessons technology teaches and not necessarily follow it in a linear way, but see what didn't
Yeah.
work and skip that. So talk about SDRs and why you think it's past its prime.
Okay. So I do think there's an analog in industrial, so we'll get to it. But yeah, for background, a sales development rep is usually a person that doesn't close business. What they do is they identify business and then they set up closing reps, sales reps, to close that business. So that's very, very common in software as a service businesses. I think it's somewhat common maybe in the financial space to some degree. Certainly in professional services, certain companies employ people to do that. The rationale is that if you have a person that's skilled at qualifying, closing, negotiating, handling objections, etc., like you don't want them sitting there dialing the phone all day or sending emails all day in order to get a call booked. And so that's what that SDR does. There are two different kinds of SDRs. One is inbound SDR and the other is an outbound SDR. And outbound SDR does what it sounds like. They're reaching out to prospects who are cold, meaning the prospect has maybe never heard of the company or they haven't at least recently engaged with the company in any way. They're not a lead they got through the website. It's just some person out there, some prospect out there that's a good fit. And that outbound SDR's job is to get in front of them somehow and get them to engage with the company. And then there's the inbound SDR that where companies that generate a lot of inbound interest, a lot of leads through their website or calls from their marketing, they would have that inbound SDR. And that inbound SDR's job is literally just to engage that lead and get them set up on a call with the salesperson. Sometimes the inbound SDR's job is to qualify it, whether there's a need there, maybe a little bit around budget and authority, et cetera. But for the most part, they're just trying to get a call booked with their sales rep that they work with. Um, it became popular, I would say, in the late 2000s and has been very common in SaaS companies, software companies for the last 15 years.
Yeah, really, I
When
think
they
it
came
started
to,
with
they
the
wrote a big
predictable
book on it.
revenue. Wasn't it predictable revenue at Salesforce that was kind of the initial
Yeah,
commonly
Aaron
discussed?
Ross's book, Predictable Revenue. He was the kind of first kind of brought the idea to the fore, right? So Salesforce at the time was challenging on-premise software. On-premise software was sold in person, implemented in person on your own hardware. And then they had the SaaS company where it's just like you create an account and you got a CRM, a customer relationship management system. And so Salesforce started with outside sales, but then they're like, hey, maybe we can do inside sales and have people do this. So they basically built the model out first, for sure. We
Okay.
adopted it at HubSpot, absolutely, um, and I think it was a powerful combination for us at HubSpot to have inbound marketing plus inside sales, and really was an efficient go-to market model.
And typically the SDR BDR is the rookie role, right? That's where somebody comes in, often
Yeah,
fresh out
it's
of college.
also Yeah, so HubSpot, right, went from hundreds of employees to I think they're 9,000 employees. And so when you're growing that fast, like there were times where you're hiring 30, 50 salespeople, and you're not going to find 30, 50 amazing salespeople. So what you got to do is grow your own.
Hmm.
And so what we did is we would hire relatively junior people, sometimes right out of school, usually 1 or 2 years of experience, and then put them in this role. And they would do that for any period of time, could be 3 months if they're rock stars, could be 2 years if they're a little bit slower, and then move into a sales role. And it's a great pitch to a relatively young person, inexperienced person, to say, hey, in 6 to 24 months, you can double your salary and become a sales rep at a fast growing startup. So that was kind of the pitch.
But does it work with
Now,
enterprise
your
sales?
question was, What's that?
Does it work with enterprise sales? If can you have a rookie reach out to the C-suite to sell a complex to schedule a meeting for a complex
So it's
product?
funny. I think it's more common in enterprise sales because there's so much work for a sales rep to do once the contact is made. They got to map the account, right? They got to talk to multiple stakeholders. They have to put together use cases. There might be multiple presentations at
Hmm.
multiple different levels of the organization. There might be proofs of concepts. Like there's a lot to do as an enterprise sales rep when you're selling software, even SaaS software. And so the more commonplace for these inbound SDRs or SDRs in general is in enterprise selling motions because the cost justifies having multiple people there, and the complexity of the sale warrants splitting up the roles. In fact, the reason why like this came about is because Aaron Ross in his book at Salesforce realized that like if he divided up the roles, like they could focus on doing one thing really well and doing it over and over again and producing a higher volume ultimately of results. Whereas if you have somebody switching between prospecting and negotiating and everything in between, like it's hard to do that consistently and do it well.
But of course, that
So
was
that
back
was the big.
before everyone was slammed with emails and slammed with voicemails and everything else. But I've interrupted you a couple times now. You're going to talk about connecting the industrial with that original
Yeah.
model.
So so first let's talk about the post. So the post was me sharing our experience with an SDR model at Databox. A lot's
Hmm.
changed. We're product led growth, meaning that people like we don't talk to anybody who's not trying our product. Um, and most of the conversations start by people either asking us a question, either from our website or once they're logged into our product. And so we had a large team of people, and we had 5,000 signups for our free product every month. So we had a large team of people that we had grown. Their only job was to either answer those questions or reach out to some of those 5,000 people and try to engage them further. And when we added people, we added some people, we did get increased sales as a result of that effort, but then it got really diminished. The results diminished as we added more people. And so we overgrew that team because we kind of expected to move half of them into a different role, and because we expected more output from them as we added them, and then neither of those worked out. So I ended up, unfortunately, letting go 12 people on that team, so reducing that team from 15 to 3 people. Um, what happened though is we actually didn't reduce our productivity that much because we improved our product interface, we improved our marketing efforts, we added a chatbot to answer basic questions, and we brought in some our technical support to help out a little bit as well, so that those 3 people that were remaining in that role could spend more of their time um, setting up our sales team with calls. We also added an incentive for them to do it, financial incentive, a commission for them when they identify deals that ultimately closed. So my post was about how I think prospects, at least buying software, have an expectation that they'll be able to figure it out themselves, and they don't need somebody in their inbox saying, "Hey, you signed up for our product. Can I help?" Because they
I think
know that
I
help will
think you
be there
said
when it's available.
I think you said specifically the new sales is waiting for buyers to reach out to you, and I think that's what stood some people's hair on end.
Yeah, the outbound. So that was the one that catches. There's a lot of people out there make a living from providing services to companies to do outbound sales, outbound
Hmm.
prospecting, and so
Right.
those people are obviously going to object to that. I was saying that in a world of SaaS companies, specifically SaaS companies, where you get to try the product for free, and it just didn't seem to make sense to have somebody sitting there sending a bunch of emails out to prospects to try to get them back into the product. We can automate most of that and achieve a good, still personalize it and achieve a good result. So
Hmm.
that's where my perspective is for our business. I'm not saying that's relevant for everybody. All right, so now let's talk about industrial. I do
Good.
think there's an analog for industrial. You've probably read Justin Roth Marsh's book, right? The Sales Machine,
I've read part of
the
it.
machine. I think he called it. Yeah, did I get that right? Um, so I think his he has. I would look at him as like the industrial version of Aaron Ross in software, because what he realizes is a similar conclusion is that if you build your sales process so that um, you anticipate what a prospect's going to want to do, want to learn, want to tell you, etc., then you can start breaking out pieces of that role, so that you're not just relying on that one superhero salesperson with a car to drive around to your clients and get them donuts and convince them to try your product, right?
Right.
And then matters. So I think he has thought about it very well. And I know that you've spent the last 10 years helping industrial companies generate inbound demand. And I think if you combine those two things, then there's still a huge opportunity for industrial companies to think about how do they make their sales process, their buying process, a lot more efficient. Measure it every step of the way. I think one of the things that SaaS companies do really well is like you're able to measure every step of the sales process, and optimize it. So whether that could be improving the way the salesperson sells, the scripts, their playbooks, improving pieces of content or tools that you launch for the buyers, improving the technology you're using just to make the dials efficient. Like there's a lot of things you can do in order to improve the throughput and the close rates through and conversion rates through a sales process, if you think about it in terms of more of a machine.
Right.
And so I think especially if an industrial company, manufacturing company has figured out how to generate inbound demand, or at least get their buyers into an opt-in database and market to them, then there's lots of opportunities for them um, to maybe even leverage a small inbound SDR team, right? That's out there, maybe setting up calls for the outside salespeople, depending on how they sell now. So I think there should be way more experimentation in
Yeah.
industrial companies. Part of the reason why I, as a chemical engineer and who did engineering for 7 years out of school in a manufacturing company, the reason I left is because they just don't try new shit.
Right.
They're too focused on their products and product development and not enough focused in on the go-to market. I'm not saying they can't be too focused on product development, but they're not enough focused in on the go-to market. And that was what was exciting to me. So that's kind of why I left. So I wish more industrial companies were experimenting with some of these things.
Yeah, and I think rather than a machine analogy, the one that I
Mm-hmm.
use with manufacturers is a manufacturing system or manufacturing line, and
Yep.
talking about using. In fact, I go from the OEE manufacturing measurement, indication of the effective, high quality net output at the end of the line, which is the
Yep.
product of the efficiency of each step. And I talk about a system I call ORE, overall revenue effectiveness, which is the same thing
Mm-hmm.
across strategy, marketing, sales, and the technology. And
Yep.
the reality is that they end up really integrated. If you think of marketing and sales as being linear functions and distinct functions the way they used to be, you fail, because if you look at
Mm-hmm.
the buying journey, people bounce back and forth. You talk about doing research on their own. Well, some days they're doing
Yeah.
research with things that we used to traditionally think were in the marketing space, and some days they're doing things that would be in the sales space, and they go back and forth. And so you've got to have
Yep.
a much better understanding of how the whole system works.
Yeah, no, I look at sales and marketing as more of like two wedges that are like sliding onto each other, right? So
Right.
of course, marketing is going to handle more of the awareness than the sales team is if you're doing it right, and sales is going to, of course, handle more of the closing than marketing is. But they all should be aware of what happen in every part of that step and be collaborating with each other to
Exactly.
produce the best content, to design the best sales process, all that. We have we launched a brand new free product last year for the sole purpose of helping our remaining outbound sales team uh, increase their response rates, right? And so there's all kinds of ways. I think if you, like you said, if you align that strategy, the marketing, sales, and your product to thinking through how do you make the sales process, the marketing process as efficient as possible. There's a lot of opportunities, and you should never just think of it as like, oh, that's marketing's job and that's sales job and that's
Right.
product's job. You have to be
Right.
working together to
Yeah,
make
for
it all
sure.
work.
All right, so back to microbrews real quick.
Yeah.
Any favorites? Any recommendations?
Yeah, my favorite is Treehouse, of course, out in Charlton here in Massachusetts. Those of you not around here, but Treehouse, I think is it's just amazing the variety of beers they have, but also just the flavor. I love the flavor profile on them. Um, they're famous, for those who don't know, for their New England IPAs, and I love a lot of other New England IPAs. Like there's like 5 really good breweries within 10 miles of me here that I'll frequent. Mighty Squirrel is one of them. Start Line Brewery. Um, let's see, Aeronaut's not too far. I'm blanking on there's one in Southborough that I enjoy. I forget the name.
We get
Anyways,
some good
but
ones on the North Shore too. You ought to come
yeah,
up here sometime,
yeah. You've been saying that. We'll have to
right?
make that a date.
All right. So LinkedIn. I obviously I
Yeah.
looked at your LinkedIn as I was refreshing my memory about some of your career history. I realized number
Yeah.
one, we have 354 shared connections. That seemed like a
Oh, we
notable
do.
number.
Wow.
Yeah.
It is.
Secondly, the thing that I've noticed is that you're really doubling down on LinkedIn. How come?
Yeah, tripling down. Yeah.
Tripling. Okay.
Yes. But it's interesting. The 354 shared connections, that actually is one of the reasons why I'm tripling down on it, is because with marketing and sales, the the density of your network matters. Uh, I think salespeople kind of intuitively know this, right? Because if you want to crack an account and you know 4 people that know them, you're going to crack that account. It's not going to be hard. You're going to call the 4 people that know and like and trust you and say, "Hey, I'm trying to get in onto Joe's calendar over at company XYZ," and you can make that happen. You got 4 shots at getting an introduction. Uh, I think marketers don't quite get that, because especially digital marketers, especially young ones that have never sold before, they've been taught that like it's all about your positioning and your product and your content and your funnel and this linear process, like you said before. And so the beauty of LinkedIn is it's like a combination of marketing and sales, and where if I write content and uh, people engage with that content, it's very easy for me to start a one-on-one conversation. So
Hmm.
marketers who are usually good at creating the content don't get that, and they don't prioritize that activity. So they never get the leads because they don't start the conversation. And then salespeople never take the time to post anything worth reading, and are just spamming. So like
Right.
if you combine those two, because I'm both, right? I consider myself a marketer and a salesperson. Um, I can I can generate leads at will. Like I literally sometimes just can't keep up with people saying, "Hey, I want to talk to you." And I've had to build processes so that I can deflect those over to other people who are trained to handle those conversations. So that's why I do it, is because the density of that network really allows me to get in front of a lot of people. So the post that we just dissected, the one on inbound SDRs, was viewed by 60,000 people. I had 150 comments. And so imagine you're a salesperson and something you say is read by 60,000 people and engages 150 people in a dialogue. Like
Right.
that is the most efficient prospecting process ever created. Um, Not to mention that also got me that post. My the number of followers I got after I posted that post was about 150 new followers.
Well.
So that's 150 people now tuning into everything else I say. And so if I repeat or tweak that message over and over again, along with other messages about our product, about our programs, etc., that's when people are like, "Oh, I've been following this guy and he's saying a lot of good stuff. I totally agree with him." That's when they reach out and say, "Hey, I've been following you for 9 months. I'm ready to get started as a customer, as a partner of yours." And
Got it.
so the nurturing that happens because of the density of that network, because of the engagement that that network density provides on my content, it creates this just steady flow of qualified, ready to go leads.
All right. So a post on LinkedIn is, what is it, 1,500
Mm-hmm.
characters?
3,000 max.
3,000 characters. So what does that work out to
Yeah.
in words? 700 or something like that?
Oh, I don't know.
Um,
I never figured that out.
maybe
They're not
500.
long.
Okay.
I often have to shorten it to fit.
So tell me about your typical daily workflow, because I know you're posting almost every day. What time do you start in the morning? When do you
Yeah.
write? How do you juggle everything you got to do?
I generally write all at once and then schedule 4 or 5 posts in the morning. I usually schedule them to be published somewhere between 6 and 8 a.m. I don't know why. It's just what I do. And then during the day, I'll pay attention to comments in between meetings or in between other tasks, and then and respond to people because that's an important thing to do. And then occasionally during the day, I'll have this random thought and I'll pump out a 10-sentence post, which I can do in 15 minutes because I'm inspired to write something or
Right.
somebody shares with me or a call I just had or whatever. So
So, as
um,
a rule of thumb, a
so yeah,
3,000 character post, how long do you spend on it?
uh, probably 30 minutes to an hour.
And you write it in Google Docs and edit it before you put it into LinkedIn, or do
Yeah, I
you
use
just,
Evernote
okay,
just out of habit. Yeah.
okay,
Um, and I'll paste it and then schedule it. Yeah.
got it. All right, so let's talk a little bit more specifically about Databox.
Okay.
Kind of, I gave a quick introduction about it, and you've alluded to it as you've gone through the conversation. But
Mhm.
give us 30 seconds about what Databox is and why it's important.
Yeah, our mission is to help companies make more data informed decisions more frequently. I think most companies are on a cadence of looking at their data way too infrequently. Whether it's yearly in some cases or quarterly, that's not enough.
Right.
Even monthly or weekly isn't enough. There should be every team at every company should have a dashboard that monitors both the results they're producing and the efficiency at which they're producing it, not just the manufacturing floor, but every department. Um, and that people that are doing the work should be paying attention to the data, both individual data as well as team data. Uh, and then once you have all that data in one spot, you should let the computers tell you what to do. You should let the computers tell you how your performance compares to other companies. With marketing and sales, especially, it's the benchmarks are not difficult because you can basically the software kind of measures things consistently for us across companies. You should predict where you're likely to land, right? And that should be a live calculation based on the work that your team's doing, updated constantly. You should be looking for things you can do now to impact the future by using correlation. So you should know the things that you do now will correlate to lagging indicators in the future. Not a lot of people know how to do that or even think to do that. And you should be monitoring your data as leaders of your organization should be monitoring all the data in order to identify when something's not going well so they can course correct or jump on it and manage it appropriately. And they should be monitoring for things when things are going well so they can say, hey, that's working well. Can we make that even work better? And so software does all those things for people. But if you don't have all your data in one spot, you can't manage your business that way. And that's what Databox does. That's what Databox helps people do. Is pull all that data into one spot, build the dashboards and reports they need to both monitor and report out results, um, and and then do all those functions like benchmarking, forecasting, anomaly detection, correlations in order to identify um, how to improve performance, both on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual basis.
Yeah,
So
so I mean, you're definitely talking as an engineer, the way you talk through all of that.
yeah,
I mean, and that permeates the way you think about it, and I think that's
yeah,
fascinating. Now, benchmarking is an element of it that you've actually kind of turned into a sales approach as well, and you coach others on how
that's
to
right.
use it as a sales approach. So the idea, I guess, is that it's really hard to get into new accounts in many cases. So if I think about,
Yeah.
for instance, an industrial trade association. Industrial trade associations spend a lot of time talking about the value they create for the members, and many of their claims are dubious. There's some that deliver
Mm-hmm.
value, there's some that don't. But if
Yep.
the trade association offered a benchmarking tool to help their members really understand how they stood in terms of lead generation, length of sales cycle, closing rates, all those kinds of things, that would offer, seems to me, great value for those members. But I haven't found industrial trade associations that are interested in doing that. How do you think you can apply benchmarking to the industrial space?
Yeah. I try not to teach new things to old organizations.
Fair point.
uh, where we've had the most success with the approach that you're talking about is teaching consultants, creators, and professional services firms, mostly small professional services firms, to leverage benchmarks in their sales process. And when we talk about benchmarks, there's two things. One is performance benchmarks, like the ones you talked about, where it's like how am I closing the same amount of sales as my peers? Is my conversion rates the same? Is my website traffic the same? Is my ad cost, at per click the same. Like that's performance stuff. And then the second type of benchmarks is process benchmarks. So that's how our company is doing certain things, and comparing how you're doing something to how a group of other companies are doing. All of this data gets collected and anonymized and then made available back to the participants in the group. And so what we've done is built a live, always up to date benchmark study. It's the largest benchmark study in the world across multiple um, systems. So we integrate with 70 plus software systems. We pull the KPIs out of there in a standardized way. And then we have tens of thousands of companies opted into that. So we can help companies benchmark everything from how many times their website's being shown in Google search results to their profit margins. And we've made it available for free. It's the only benchmark thing like it that's for free. Most of where we got this idea, it's not new. Benchmarking isn't new. It was made very popular in the 80s by big consulting companies, McKinsey, Bain, Boston Consulting Group. They really pioneered benchmarking with the Fortune 500. What we've done is built a system that enables smaller consultants, smaller professional services firms to build benchmark studies of their own, tap into the anonymous data set that we've already accrued of both performance and business process benchmarks, and use that in their marketing, their sales, and their client management processes.
But
So
based on
that's what
another
we built.
recent, but I would say based on another recent LinkedIn post, you find that most consultants don't do that well. I think you didn't have many
Yeah.
kind things to say about some of your consulting experiences where
Yeah,
people just
your listeners are going to catch on that I like to poke the bear in order to get people to think. It's really the only way to do it. I think if you go in trying to tell everybody they're like, when I'm one-on-one with someone, I'm going to find the good things in them, right, and all that. But when I'm marketing, it's really about challenging the status quo to get people to think differently. Otherwise, people ignore you. And so, yes, we've hired consultants to help us. I've also, as you know, worked with many professional services firms and consultants. And the way they market, especially marketing agencies, is ironically like they don't market themselves well.
right.
And so and they don't sell well. Like I was a little frustrated with some of the consultants we were working with because I want to know, how does our performance compare? I want to know what other companies like mine are doing, and I want somebody to be able to tell me, hey, if uh, what is my forecast, and is something going on right now? What can I do today, or what can my team do today or this week to impact the outcomes and goals we have? And so there's very few consultants that do that well. Now, to be fair to consultants, every business is different. You can't walk in with a bunch of benchmarks and with guns blazing saying you should be doing this and you should be doing that. You need to put it in the context. But what I found is that most consultants can't even have those conversations.
Right.
I'd be totally fine with them saying, I don't know, we can find out, or hey, we should run this experiment to figure that out. But here's what I do know. But they don't even try to have those conversations. So that was my post. As you know, we have plenty of partners who have adopted what we're teaching. And we have one-on-one. We worked with 60 plus partners last year to get them doing many of these things. And then we just launched a free training program for our other partners to check out and learn these processes as well. So my goal is to go out and teach consultants and professional services firms how to sell like the McKinseys, the Bains, the Boston Consulting Groups, and sell at a higher margin, sell better and deliver better value to clients
Yeah,
by using data.
and also address the risk, the unease that companies have about engaging a consultant, spending the money, even if it's not a ton of money, spending the money, knowing that there's going to be a change management aspect to it. And they're willing to do
Yep.
that in many cases if they're comfortable that it will have the impact that they expect it to. But if you just ask them to take
That's
it
right.
on faith, that's hard.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I know SEO fairly well, but we hired an SEO consultant.
Right.
But I had to teach him how to do the data to give me a justification for the additional effort, right?
Right.
He could tell me tactically how to do it. He was great at that, but he couldn't do the research, run the numbers, and then monitor the impact. And so, like, that's the kind of work. I don't want to be specific in my post about who I was working with or
Sure.
whatever, but that's the kind of analysis and really sales and service that I'm expecting from
Right.
consultants. They need to be able to have those conversations.
All right, so let's talk about product-led growth. You mentioned yours is a PLG model where basically
Yeah,
there's a freemium version. Somebody likes the idea, they sign up, it doesn't cost anything, they can experiment in a limited way. If they find there's value, then they're encouraged to subscribe at some other level or maybe bring it into their company and have a number of people participate or whatever the case may be. If
yeah,
if I'm an industrial company, say a capital equipment manufacturer, where a typical sale is $1 million, and I'm trying to sell into an account that's got three of the competitors' machines at $1 million each.
yeah,
And I ask an engineer to just take a flyer because, oh, yeah, well, we're going to have less downtime or we're higher quality or something like that. It doesn't work.
yeah.
So industrial manufacturers, I believe, have to find some way to have a PLG analog to help them
Hmm.
get into accounts so that they can begin, they have a meaningful commercial relationship, they can get paid for their business development and discovery, they're creating
Hmm.
relationships on the factory floor, they're learning where the warts
Yep,
are, they're doing all that. But
yep.
that's a hard mindset shift for companies because they tend to think this is what we know, this is what we do well, this is the limitation of our expertise, we're not qualified to talk to other people about it. And so
Right.
with that long-winded introduction, where I'm going with this is I think that's a huge channel and partnership ecosystem and near-bound opportunity for industrial companies. So if they, for instance, partnered with a company that does machine monitoring, they could go in with a
Hmm.
small sale, they could do line audits, they could create real-time alerts, they could even benchmark using that data from the machine monitoring and
That's right.
be, let's say it's a $5,000 a month engagement, for their people to be on the floor creating value for the engineers. So guess what? Then they've got opportunities to talk about the machines and the competitors' downtime and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
What's your reaction to
yeah.
that?
Yeah, I'm frankly surprised that the subscription model hasn't caught on in the capital equipment world, right? So if you want to launch a manufacturing company, it's like nearly impossible unless you're already a manufacturing company, um, and especially for any really engineered products. And so I'm surprised there aren't capital equipment manufacturers out there that aren't willing to work with entrepreneurs and say, yeah, this is $1 million piece of equipment, but we're going to own it until you pay for it and you pay us monthly. Now, I get that that's not great for their cash flow, but it opens up amazing opportunity to really be a partner for that business, um, and charge for other services,
Yeah, when you
right?
roll
Charge
in the
for that monitoring,
consumables and
charge for that
the
management.
replacement parts and the data monitoring, as you're saying,
Of,
absolutely, you
of
can package
course,
all
but
this
they're
stuff with
doing all that now after the fact. It's like you
right.
buy the equipment and then you need replacement parts. So all I'm saying is like it's one thing. Like we're going to manage that. Of course, every year you're going to have to go and negotiate it, or you might even just raise your prices, right? So
Right.
there's maybe some risk reward to be managed on the sales side. But I think like if we want entrepreneurial manufacturing to come back to the United States, which I think is important, then I think we need to think about how do we enable entrepreneurs in the manufacturing space. And I think the way it's set up now is tough. And I think SaaS model is an opportunity. And I think your point about measurement, like the ability, the sensor technology is so much further along, and of course, transmitting data and all that is securely transmitting data securely is very simple these days.
Right.
And so there's amazing opportunities, I think, to gather data from multiple clients, anonymize it, and really help all their clients improve, productivity. Now, you might get into some issues with Ford not wanting, GM to even be able to benchmark against each other, but their bigger problem is BYD and Tesla. So maybe they should team up and do that stuff. So I
Any
think there's a huge opportunity there to think a little differently.
anything on the
Strong.
Databox roadmap for people to be able to add other data sources and do, for instance, taking benchmark data out of their machining centers and that kind of thing.
Yeah, we're not too far away from that. So like anyone can push any data into Databox. We integrate with any or all of the popular SQL databases. We have APIs where you can push data in a structured format, um, without a problem. So there's really no limitations in terms of getting data into Databox. Um, when it comes to benchmarking, we do need to standardize the measurement
Mm-hmm.
of KPIs across companies. And so we have a system for building integrations with other products that we do that allows us to standardize. So if somebody came to us and said, hey, I want to integrate this software, and we would probably point them to build their own integration first. If they came to us and said, hey, I have 500 companies that are using this software and I want to build an integration with you, we could have a conversation with them about building out a benchmark.
Got
And
it.
it wouldn't be difficult for us. We've done it literally hundreds of times. We've done the pieces of the process hundreds of times. We've just never had anyone come to us and say that. Usually the way when we choose to build an integration and benchmarks, it's because our customers are asking for that integration, and there are tens of thousands of companies out there that are using that product, and so we build the integration
Sure.
in order to go after that market or serve the customers asking for that. So but if somebody with a software product or a hardware product said, hey, I want to run a benchmark study with you guys and use your systems, that would be feasible. We'd have to have a conversation and most likely charge them a nominal fee to get it done, but it's totally feasible.
Okay. All right. Now, obviously, you're deep in the digital marketing and SaaS world. For
Mm-hmm.
listeners who coming from an industrial space, are there any blogs or YouTube channels or podcasts that you'd recommend where they could learn more about some of the nuance of these digital marketing and sales topics?
Well, yours, yeah, of course. I no, seriously, I like you've been writing um, on digital marketing for manufacturing industrial companies for longer than anyone I know. I think there's only a handful of people that I know now that are even um, focused on that, let alone as long as you have been. So I highly recommend people read your writing. You're extremely um, you're an excellent writer, excellent communicator.
Well, you're
So
making me
I
blush, but
think
I didn't ask the
yeah,
question
no,
for that
I'm not,
feedback.
not blowing smoke. I don't say this to most people. So I've been reading your stuff for a while. You have complex thoughts, but you have ways of communicating them clearly, and I think that's the hard thing. And you're bridging the gap between the manufacturing world and this world. There's lots of other companies out there that write about um, and write about digital marketing. I am still a huge fan of HubSpot. I think from a B2B marketing, I love Dave Gerhardt's stuff at Exit 5. My old colleague, John Bonini, if somebody wants to do podcasting, they should be talking to John Bonini. He's really helpful at helping people think through how to get the most out of your podcast. The guys at Hatch, the team at Hatch is good with podcasting. If you want to learn and launch podcasting. So there's really no shortage of people out there talking about digital marketing. I
And
don't think there's a lot of people talking about digital marketing as it relates to manufacturing, digital,
right,
and industrial like you are. So
when it comes to podcasts, what speed do you listen at?
usually 1.25. Um, but it depends on what I'm doing. Sometimes I'll play a podcast like while I'm doing other work, in which case I just play it normal because then I lose focus on
Right.
it. But it's kind of interesting to hear in the background. But if I'm gardening or walking or something, walking the dogs or something, I'll listen to it a little faster.
Got it.
But I'm preparing to write my first book. I've been talking about it for like a year and a half now, and I'm not in earnest doing it yet. But my expectation is I'll publish a book in 2025, and so I'm listening to books lately because there's a lot of books I've read over the last 20 some years that have shaped the way I think, and I want to be able to properly cite them in my book and give credit. And so that's what I've been listening to a lot lately.
Got it. You manage a large overseas team.
Yeah.
Any kind of important lessons learned there that might be of interest to people?
I don't manage the team myself very closely. I joined as CEO for a technical founder, but he's also an excellent entrepreneur, and he runs product engineering, our HR people team, as well as finance. And
Got it.
so I don't have to be too involved in that. He's excellent at that stuff. We talk multiple times a week and we're on the same page about stuff, but he largely runs the operations of the business. I do have, and I also have experienced sales and customer support, customer service leader that runs that org, he reports to me, and then I have a chief of staff that helps me with keeping people on track. She also is our RevOps director. So I generally aren't managing the people overseas. The founder is from overseas. He flew over here with nothing other than a backpack and ended up getting into a TechStars program to incubate the business. But he moved back there a few years ago, and then a big portion of the team is there in Slovenia, where he's from. There's actually two founders, but he's the main operator in the business. The other founder is a chief technical officer. And so, yeah, I don't have to manage it much. It is challenging to manage, remote people and people in the office. Our product engineering team is completely in the office, and our go-to-market team, sales, marketing, support, et cetera, are remote. So that's a challenge, especially since it's not just in one region. We have people in multiple continents.
Mm-hmm.
So it's challenging, but we try to be very transparent with how the business is performing. We are hyper focused in on project management and knowing what everybody's doing and reporting out how things are working. Of course, we use our own product to track productivity of every team. I don't know if I have any like one silver bullet tip, but I'm a big fan of the EOS system, and that allows me to be kind of a more of a public, not a public company, but a public CEO. I can
Mm-hmm.
focus a little more on partnerships, marketing, external stuff, while I have other people really operating the
And so
business for
EOS,
the
for
most
people
part.
that haven't heard that, that's Entrepreneurial Operating System, the traction book, right?
Yeah. If somebody, if you're a company that's maybe between a few $1 million and $100 million, and you don't have an operating system of a cadence for how you do things and structure for how you manage people and processes and performance, then I would highly recommend picking up the book Traction, by Gino Wickman. He's the creator of the Entrepreneurial Operating System, as you know,
So,
and it's just basically a playbook for how you think about running your business. Very structured, very systematic.
and what worries you? What makes you nervous right now? Obviously, you're very methodical. You're very structured in the way you approach things, but there's also big unknowns and risks. What do you think, as you look at the business space right now, is your biggest concern?
Yeah. I've never been more confident in our business. We've really figured out it. We innovated a lot last year. That innovation we're monetizing it now effectively, and I think we're in a space that's just going to keep growing. Everybody's talking about AI now, but ultimately you need data
Right.
to run AI models off of, and everybody's obsessed with generative AI around content and language. But the next phase is going to be autonomous decision making and things like that. And I think we're in an amazing spot with what we've built to be able to help companies, um, build that kind of stuff, um, leverage software to make decisions and optimize performance of companies. So I've never been more bullish on the company. Um, I feel shell shocked to agree, and I know you're a military guy, and I probably shouldn't use that term out of respect for our military and veterans, but um, I just feel like there's been so many external things that have happened over the last few years in terms of uh, external bumps in the road, whether it's political stuff, which just seems at all time low in terms of unity in our country, whether it's COVID, whether it's inflation, whether it's um, uh, banks failing. We were a Silicon Valley Bank customer, and
Oh
I
man.
spent a weekend thinking that I lost millions of dollars. So I just feel like I'm waiting for the next thing to happen that's going to impact the economy, which will impact our business. And we manage our business with in the cash flow positive. So unlike most software companies that are raising and spending money, like we manage our business thoughtfully that way. But who knows what's going to happen? So
So,
that's my
so
biggest
against that
fears.
backdrop of uncertainty, I keep
Yeah,
coming back to the fact that you have this focus where you stick with things for so long. And so
Yeah.
if you were sitting on the board of a middle market industrial manufacturer right now, where most of the board, is family or finance or operations or manufacturing folks, they don't have marketing, they don't have sales, they don't have kind of awareness of some of what's going on with AI necessarily. What would you
Hmm.
be telling them about where they should focus and how they maintain that focus for the appropriate length of time? Because that seems to be a superpower of yours.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess so I don't do it on a. It's a lot easier to build and tweak software than it is to launch, physical products, especially if it's an engineered product that's being used in another manufacturing environment or a component for another product or whatever. So I won't pretend to have a silver bullet there. I'll stick to my lane. Like if I was on one of those boards, I would be more focused in on the sales marketing
Of
and
course.
all of that. And I would be looking at their sales and marketing processes, specifically the processes that they use to specify or customize products, or validate the cost efficiency or the effectiveness of products in their client's environment. I'd be looking at those processes and thinking about how do I software enable that, so that I can make my sales process more efficient, so that I can gather more data to use in my marketing, so that I can have ongoing relationships with my clients in a way where I'm adding value to their manufacturing floor, whether that's helping them be more efficient or whether that's helping them, handle peak order volume
Right.
or the opposite, right? So that's where I would be obsessed. The company that I worked at before I got into software, I would go out on the road. I'd bring this huge piece of equipment. I don't think I could get it through the airports right now because it looked like a bomb. Um, and I would go in and I'd set up all the sensors and I would bring our product, I ship our products, and then we would run head-to-head tests against ours and our competitors' products. And the goal was either to prove that one, we were either cheaper on a per unit production basis, meaning that we could help them produce their part for less variable commodity cost of ours, or show that I could help them improve their throughput, depending on what they were focused on at the time. And I would collect all that data and I plug it into a spreadsheet and then I would share that back to them in a presentation. Like that can all be done in real time all the time, in order to really help clients make sure that they're optimizing the right metric at the right time. And so that's what I would be thinking about, is how do I take that selling process, that sales engineering process, and turn that into a product in and of itself.
Yeah, and I would say that's technical sales. And obviously, then you graduated to sales when you hired a sales trainer. I just wrote a blog post
Mhm.
really um, slamming the idea of hiring technical salespeople because if you want a technical reference, the internet is for that. If you want a salesperson that can speak to the C suite, understand business accounting, do a justification, understand and uncover the compelling reasons to buy, that's not somebody that you think of as a technical sales engineer who's worked at three companies in the industry and knows the language. That's a unique
Right.
salesperson who you need to hire and then teach them the technical stuff. So anyway, there's my
Yeah,
little
yeah.
rant at the end.
No, I hear what you're saying. I think I it's always been helpful for me in my sales roles to be an engineer.
Of course.
Um, not just because I think like an engineer, but at HubSpot, I was our first sales engineer. Also, I did
Right.
that while I was building the partner program, and it was because I took the time to learn how to build a website on our product. Wasn't that hard? But none of the other salespeople could even memorize the terms necessary to talk to a developer, let
Wow.
alone jump in there and tweak the code when
Right.
needed, right?
Right.
And so I think if there's any salespeople listening to your call or engineers listening to your call, like that combination of skills where you're technically adept with your product or other products and you know how to sell effectively,
Sure.
it's powerful. I used to get on calls as a sales engineer and I would have to redo the qualification because the person didn't ask the right qualification questions.
Right.
And by the end of the call, I could often close it.
Wow.
But that's because not only could I hang with the engineer and get those questions out of the way,
Right.
but also see what was missing in the sales process
Yeah, that's
and fix that.
a
So
beautiful story. All right.
yeah.
So how does everyone reach you? Obviously, LinkedIn is the primary place where you're active. They ought to follow you on LinkedIn. I'll drop the link to
Yes.
your LinkedIn profile on the show notes. How can they get more info about Databox?
Databox.com. We just went through a repositioning and rebranding with our new focus. We still have things that will be rolling out that aren't rolled out yet, that aren't reflected, but check out databox.com. I think it communicates our value proposition quite clearly. If you want to benchmark your marketing, your sales, your customer service KPIs, go to benchmarks.databox.com. It's all, again, all free. You can also try our analytics reporting dashboard product for free as well. So check us out there. If somebody's a consultant, professional service firm, they want to partner with us, follow me on LinkedIn. You'll get an education there, and I have people that can handle conversations if you're interested in partnering with us, and actively looking for partners, especially with unique expertise like you in different industries or with different technology or with different focus areas that we can partner with.
Cool. Well, this has been fabulous, Pete. It's everything I expected and more. It's great to talk to you, and
Yep.
I love this combination of engineering and digital and sales and your business savvy and acumen. Anything that you want to finish up with? Any suggestions based on today's market situation and growth opportunities for industrial manufacturers?
Yeah, get your data together, whether that's your own sales and marketing data, whether that's your own your manufacturing data. That's an asset. Um, you're not going to be able to go and hire um, AI computer developers, computer scientists that know AI, and anytime soon for any reasonable price. But you will kick yourself when you hire them 3 years from now to do something if you don't have your data together.
Right.
So get your data together, aggregate as much data as you can that's relevant to your business. It's going to be a superpower that's going to help you serve your clients better in the future and innovate better, all that. So get your data together.
What a powerful way to finish. Thanks very much for your time, Pete. Great to chat with you.
Yeah, man. Same.